Let me start over with the mic. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Grand Rounds. For those of you in the back, if you're having any trouble seeing or hearing the presentation, there are plenty of seats down here in front near the speaker who I have been assured is not actually going to try to touch you. So it's safe. It's safe down here in the front of the room where the speaker is, rather than back there where you're far away and disengaged. So I just want to say that. Hi, Bryce. How are you? I'm really pleased to introduce Emily Borman-Shoap. We try to protect some time on the Grand Round schedule each year to talk about the state of various activities in the department. Joe Neglia does a state of the department address. We have some of our research abstracts that get presented from our trainees. And then we also typically have a chief medical officer address that Abe Jacob gives to tell us a little bit about our clinical operations and the status of our QI initiatives. We also want to make sure that people understand what's going on in the residency program, some of the exciting changes and innovations that are happening. So I'm pleased that Emily's here to share that information with you. I think most of you know Emily. She's a graduate of our residency program and a former chief resident, was an associate director of the residency program before taking over as the program director a little over 3 years ago. And importantly, she's got a couple of other leadership roles that go beyond just our program. She's one of the local directors of our EPAC program, and I think she'll probably mention that in her talk, so I won't say anything more about that. And recently, she was accepted into the Association of Pediatric Program Directors LEAD program, which is Leadership and Educational Academic Development Program. And that's a program in which she'll participate with other program directors to develop her own scholarship and innovative approaches to residency education here at the University of Minnesota. So a really good opportunity both for her and for us. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emily Borman-Shoap to talk about the state of the residency program here at the University of Minnesota.
Any of you here? I'm on? Yes, okay, good. I made this slide right before we started. I was like, oh yeah, the Grand Rounds people always have that slide where they say that nobody gives them money and they're not going to talk about off-label uses of things. I also am not getting any money or using anything off-label. So some of the things I wanted to do today, the first thing I want to say is please feel free to interrupt me. This can be very informal. I'm very comfortable being interrupted. So if I say something that you're curious about, just raise your hand and ask the question. This is kind of the chance for everybody to hear about the things that are going on in the residency program. I think rather than running the mic around, I'll just repeat your question because this is recorded in case someone was so inclined to watch it later. So I thought I might just take some time to make sure everybody knows who's on the residency team because it's a much bigger team than it used to be with a lot of great people. For the faculty in the audience, I often get questions about ways that faculty or fellows can engage with the teaching and administration of the residency program, so I'll talk about some of those things. I wanted to sort of highlight some current and upcoming projects, some of which have been in place for a couple of years, some of which came out of a program retreat that we had last fall. And then something that I have gotten more interested in is thinking about how we define success in the residency program. So having specific outcome measures that we track over time to tell if we're doing what we're trying to do. So let's talk about the team. This is his slide for John to show that he gets to be the boss of me sometimes. And there's obviously, like, I was thinking about all the different things that could be on there, like the residents give input, and the patients, and the nurses, and Brooks Jackson, and obviously there's lots of different people who have a vested interest in the way we do our work in the residency program. But at the simplest level, my role as the program director is a part of the medical education team in our department. John Andrews, in his role as associate head for education, provides supervision and oversight for both the residency program, the fellowships, and medical student rotations. And then I've got a really big team of people that I am not the boss of, but that I'm fortunate to collaborate with, and I just wanted to make sure you know who those people are. So when I came on board as an associate program director, it was our second year of ever having that position defined. And Tom George and I came on pretty quickly at around the same time in that newly defined role. The ACGME kind of defined some new requirements about if you have a residency program of a certain size, you have to have a certain number of people helping you to run the program. And I think one of the things we've realized over the past several years is we just have such a wonderful community of people who are committed to education, and particularly with our affiliate sites, that we wanted to really strengthen that relationship and give it a name by having official associate program directors at each of our key educational sites, as well as several people here. So many of you will know Sonia Coliani. Her clinical home base is at Hennepin County Medical Center. And her main roles with the program are really helping to design and run the curriculum for the inpatient rotation at HCMC, and importantly, she's our continuity clinic director. So she makes all the assignments, she thinks about our continuity clinic curriculum. Tom George is here in the NICU. He's the chair of our Residency Review Committee, which you'll hear more about in a minute. And he really helps us to think about what's going on in our ICUs here at the university. Obviously, as a neonatologist, he really helps us understand the NICU, and he seems to have an in with the Pediatric Critical Care Division as well, so he helps me make connections there. Angela Gepford is over at Children's Hospitals and Clinics in Minnesota, and she actually recently transitioned to being their Director of Graduate Medical Education, taking over for Joe Sokolowski, who had that position for a long time. And Angela is, like myself, a general pediatrician, and she really has a deep commitment to helping promote the engagement of general pediatricians in teaching. And as many of you are aware, there's just a lot of pressures for general pediatricians to be productive in their clinical practice and to see a lot of patients, and it creates tensions with also teaching medical students and residents. And so she's starting to do some really interesting work exploring this concept of an educational RVU, so a way of giving a teacher credit for taking on a medical student or a trainee and not having them be punished if they see a few less patients that we have. So we're extremely fortunate to have her leadership and guidance and her primary care focus over at Children's. Patty Hobday's here at the university. She's a rheumatologist, and she's a part of our EPAC team. So I'll talk about EPAC a little bit at the end again, but EPAC stands for Education in Pediatrics Across the Continuum. It's a national pilot project that's exploring the concept of whether we can take medical students and advance them through their training based on competence. Can they do the things they need to do rather than time? So you just spend 4 years in med school and you must be ready because you logged the man hours. So the other schools who are doing this pilot project with us are UCSF, Utah, and Colorado. And it's not a pediatric-specific project necessarily, but we know that pediatrics is a field that people tend to be able to choose early and stay interested in for their career. So it's a durable career interest. So our EPAC students applied to the program in their second year of medical school in December. And when they were accepted to a totally different third year and fourth year medical school curriculum and guaranteed a residency spot at the University of Minnesota. So it's a really revolutionary approach to medical education. We're learning a ton by embarking on this endeavor. And Patty, along with myself and John and Betsy Murray, but particularly Patty, has been really instrumental in creating this entirely new third-year rotation for our students called a longitudinal integrated clerkship. And I won't be able to do that justice, but 3 out of our 4 EPAC students, wave your hands, guys, I'll show you pictures later, are doing that rotation right now. And residents, if you see them around, you should ask them about it because it's a really cool experience, and I think they're going to get some things out of it that students on the typical rotations aren't experiencing. Maren Olson, also at Children's Hospitals and Clinics. She's based at St. Paul. She's a hospitalist. She has a lot of interest in mentorship, resilience, and wellness. She also, along with myself, Andrew Olson, and Emily Rudinger, has been very active in our cognitive bias curriculum that we've been doing with the residents. So she's a great team member. And then Mike Pitt, many of you probably saw him win our Faculty Educator Award at the banquet. He is a co-director of our Global Health Track along with Cindy Howard. He is also really interested in promoting resident scholarship and is doing a neat new project about that I'll talk about later. So those are the associate program directors. You'll see there used to be none, and then there were 2, and now there are 6, because I realized I can just like knight them and say, now you are an associate program director, help me. So the chief residents, for those who were at that banquet on Friday, heard me go on and on about how amazing they are, and I think as is a tradition in our program, the chief residents are really kind of the lifeblood of this program. They're really doing the day-to-day work of the teaching, the administration, giving feedback to residents, handing out Kleenex and chocolate when it's needed, addressing system issues. So our outgoing chiefs, Adam, Judy, Laura, and Abby, have really been incredible, and we're delighted to welcome our new crew. This is when they did their chief resident sort of training camp, which is in sunny Florida, I think is where they went. Or you went to California, I can't remember. Anyway, somewhere nicer than here that had palm trees. So Alan Christensen, Patricia Hickey, Heather Dahlquist, and Paul Vikarma will be our chiefs. They're on a chief resident elective right now, kind of learning the ropes, and then starting July 1st, they'll take over. So I kind of highlighted the teaching roles that they take the lead on, but there's obviously much, much more that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And then our residency coordinators, again, the list is sort of too long to really talk about what they do. One thing that we have really worked on in the past couple of years is really tightening up our elective and sort of core elective or scheduling process. It used to be totally willy-nilly where residents would be sort of figuring out their own educational rotations sometimes the week before they were supposed to be doing something. It was very chaotic for everyone involved, and Amy and Allison have really done an incredible job of making that process predictable, creating relationships with our specialty coordinators. So Amy Gogg is our senior residency coordinator. Allison Chandler works with her. Lauren Sepp is our key EPAC coordinator. She also manages my calendar, so lnsepp@umn.edu is a really good email for you to know if you want to find me. And then our global health track has become such a robust part of our program that we actually protect time for Valerie Cole to do the administration of that program. And for those who aren't familiar with it, our global health track is a series of educational opportunities that any resident can participate in over the course of their training. You can earn a certificate at the end, but that requires a lot of effort beyond what a typical resident would do. So you take an exam before you go abroad, you complete a series of online modules and in-person coursework, and then most people rotate abroad at one of our partner sites, although we do have some local opportunities to work with immigrants and refugees or Native American reservations for residents who aren't able to travel as far. So the global health track is definitely something that we're quite proud of and have invested in terms of our infrastructure. I always also like to remind people that we have a really big Med Peds program. So we take 23 Peds residents per year. We take 10 Med Peds residents per year. That is a very large Med Peds program. And their home base in terms of their administrative offices is over in the Department of Medicine. So I think sometimes Mike Ilward, who's their program director, and Taj aren't quite as visible, although Taj certainly does quite a bit of attending over here. And they, I think, really bring a great energy to our program. I think our Med Peds residents are just routinely, wonderfully clinically inquisitive, hardworking. They bring these great things they've learned from the internal med side that keep us on our toes. I was always delighted to have a Med Peds senior when I was attending on the wards, because if somebody had chest pain or a funny EKG, I could say, help me, this is an adult problem, I don't know what to do. So they're a big part of our residency program. We've really done a lot of work to establish regular communication and partnership with them, and I think we've got some really nice things going on. And they're trying some new things, and I'm not going to talk about quite as much, but for the faculty, you may have heard from Mike about their full-day clinic pilot that they're doing this year to increase their primary care exposure. And then just also to remind you that we're all intertwined. So if I make a change with the residency program, that can have huge impact on the medical student teams or on how things work for the fellows. So we try to stay regularly connected with the fellowship program directors and the medical student rotations, and to think about how all of our parts of education stick together. So we have a once-a-month medical education office meeting where we all come together. As John mentioned, I have been quite involved at the Association of Pediatric Program Directors, which is our national organization. Aside from being accepted to lead, which is a year-long leadership cohort, I've also had a leadership position as the chair of the Learning Technology Task Force, which the residents probably won't be surprised. I buy everyone iPads. I love techie stuff, so that's a group that sort of focuses on how we can use technology in education. Mike Pitt is the co-chair of a new global health education interest group. Amy Gogg, our coordinator, has a leadership position in the coordinators task force. We were quite well represented at the spring national meeting. Of the total workshops offered, 1 out of 6 had a University of Minnesota faculty or chief resident as one of the presenters, which is pretty cool. So Mike Pitt's very active with global health. We did a workshop on our cognitive bias curriculum, a game-based learning workshop as well. Okay, so engagement. So if you, as a faculty member, are saying, wow, this really sounds like fun, I'd like to be a part of that, here are some ways that you could be involved. So you'll see from the numbers I get to later, but recruitment is a big business for us. We bring in a lot of people and interview them to see if they would be a good fit for our program. So we have what we call an intern selection committee, which involves a commitment of at least 3 days of interviewing applicants, as well as reviewing files and coming to our selection meeting. We have a clinical competency committee, which is a new requirement by the ACGME. That's a committee that has to come together twice a year and evaluate the performance of all the residents in our program to report to the ACGME. I'm not planning to talk about that sort of regulatory stuff very much, but if you're interested in how it works, please do ask questions. We have a residency review committee, which is a committee that we refer residents to if there have been some concerns about their performance and they may need additional support. Program evaluation committee is a committee that has residents, fellows, and faculty on it. We meet once a month on the first Tuesday of the month. And we've taken a new approach with that committee where we're really doing these deep dive evaluations of distinct educational opportunities. So the NICU rotation, the emergency department rotation, the purple team hospitalist rotation. And it's really been a great opportunity for the faculty from those rotations to all sit in the same room and talk about their approach to teaching, to hear the feedback from the residency program, and to get some ideas from us about what we'd like to see get better in the next 18 months to 2 years and what are areas of strength. We're actually wrapping up our 3rd year of block education, our protected Friday afternoon education time, which is really kind of incredible to me. And I think it's become clear that it probably would be helpful for us and fun to get input from a slightly broader group of people about how those sessions are going, what can we continue to do to make them high yield and interactive and really kind of push the envelope. So I'm going to be working with the incoming group of chiefs to think about how we might form a committee that I hope will have faculty members on it. I would really love to engage a broader group of people to think about how to use this time. We do have a Google Calendar that has all of the conferences here at the university. So if at any point you think, gosh, I'd like to stop in at Morning Report today, or who's giving 3M, you can look at that calendar at any point. It's on the residency webpage. Certainly coming pretty much myself, Bryce Binstadt, and Bazak Sharon are regularly cited at Morning Report. I would love to add some more names to that list. Even if you come once a month, you hear about interesting stuff that ends up coming up in other areas of your clinical practice, and it's a really short time commitment. It's just half an hour. 3M is in this room on Thursdays. We tried that new format called Chairman's Cup this year that I think was kind of fun. It was kind of a team-based case competition with faculty versus residents and fellows. I think people really enjoyed that. We plan to continue that for next year. And I think one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is now that we've had Block Ed in place for a while, how can we think about other ways to get faculty and fellows engaged in teaching with the residents in a way that's a little bit more structured than just the bedside teaching, but not as structured as Block Ed. So if people have ideas, I'd love to hear more about it. Okay, so program priorities. So about every 2 years, we do a kind of big retreat where we unplug from our regularly filled calendars and kind of get all of our education stakeholders from our different sites together, talk about SWOT, means strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I don't think we actually did the full SWOT thing, but we definitely talked about strengths and weaknesses probably and opportunities. So we did that this past August and really kind of thought about what's going well in our program, what would we like to work on over the next 3 to 5 years, and also spent some time really thinking about how to define those outcome measures that we might track over time. So some of the strengths, Joe Nagley, our department chair, is just such a staunch advocate for education. He really goes to bat for the needs of the residents and the fellows. He hosts a birthday dinner at his house with his lovely wife, Sarah, every 2 months, just because he really loves being with the residents and fellows and having that sense of community. So he's so generous with his time and his efforts. Obviously, for me, it's been wonderful to have the former program director, John Andrews, in the role that he has in our department and in his huge leadership role in the medical school as the associate dean for all of GME. The faculty that we have at all of our sites, we really, when recruitment comes around, I'm able to tell our applicants, you don't have to choose if you want to work in an underserved population or if you want the tertiary quaternary care or if you want to be in a private freestanding children's hospital. We're really able to give residents all of those experiences and allow them to tailor their free time to match their future career paths. So I think it's a really wonderful package that we have to offer. It also can be a challenge at times because we have so many things to offer. Our global health track is a big draw for people, and I think it's something that we are really proud of. And the residents, of course, the people who come to work here every day are just incredible people that are why I do my job. So some of the things we talked about in terms of in the next 3 to 5 years, what are the things we really want to work on? And I think we looked at a variety of things. We looked at our sort of nationally benchmarked ACGME survey that all the residents have to fill out in February or March of every year. We looked at our end of program evaluations. We thought about what we were hearing from fellowship directors or people in the community, and just our own experiences and looking at our curriculum. And some of the things we thought we really wanted to work on is continuing to promote a more packaged sense of how to develop and explore your future career choice. So some people will call that a track, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I think people mean when they say a track. We wanted to improve sense of community. I think Block Ed has had a really nice unintended consequence that it gets everybody together every other week, which used to be a big problem for our program because at any given point our residents are working in anywhere from 4 to 10 different places if you count Med Peds. I think we're aware that we need to continue to make sure that we're offering robust primary care training. I think it's quite good already, but we want to make it even better. Always paying attention if residents are getting the procedural experience they need to go out and do what they're going to do when they're in practice. We really want to promote residents being able to do research or have scholarship during their residency. And then I think the sort of tragic news from last summer about the 2 interns who committed suicide really got everyone in the graduate medical education community thinking about how can we promote resident well-being, how can we make sure our residents are doing okay, or if they're not, finding something that we can do about it. So I'll go a little bit into each of those priority areas. So when someone uses the term track, they usually mean it to describe sort of a set of curricular elements, whether it's rotations or projects that you do that are designed to prepare you for some future thing, whether it's having expertise in global health or a certain specialty or research. One of the things that I often tell applicants is I'm a little wary of getting so rigid with tracks because I think that's one of the beauties of the way our residency program is laid out is that you can be a little more fluid and explore over time, and you may change your mind halfway through. So one of the things we hope to take advantage of with this wonderful protected time we have in block education is to create what we call learning communities. And so what we imagine is that 6 times over the course of the year, we'll have the residents break out during a portion of block ed, and come together as a group of first, second, and third residents and Med Peds with faculty mentorship in their field of interest. And we might spend one session dedicated to how do you explore if this is the right career for you? What's work-life balance like in this job? How could I incorporate research if I go into a primary care field? So probably the general topic headers might be the same for each session, but each group might think about things differently. And I think these learning communities will be a tremendous opportunity for our faculty to engage with the residents. It wouldn't be a huge time commitment 6 times per year. And one of the things I'm really hoping for is just that the residents will build their network of mentors earlier on in their training, because depending on what your schedule's like and who you happen to work with, it sometimes takes 9 to 12 months for residents to really kind of find their people and that person they connect with and see as a source of mentorship. I certainly would love maybe at the end to get feedback from the group about thinking about how we package these learning communities. We thought we might group them in this way, although that's open to suggestion. Some of the things we thought about is just our typical numbers of who goes into which field. So we usually have about half of our class going into primary care, certainly have an increasing number going into hospitalist medicine. We thought emergency medicine and critical care paired well together because of the similar focus on sort of procedures and acute type care. And then the other subspecialty or fellowship-bound folks might find common ground. And as I mentioned, we would plan to sort of cover typical topics. And residents wouldn't have to commit, I'm always going to go to the primary care learning community. You could explore different ones over time. So we hope to start that this year, actually. In this upcoming academic year, and Maren Olsen has really partnered with me to think about how to get this off the ground. It got covered up. Anyway, roadmap, you can still sort of see. So another part of that is really thinking about the mentorship package. So all of our residents have a program advisor that they meet with twice per year. But we really just kind of want to lay out that roadmap. By 6 months into intern year, you should have thought about these things. You should have made these connections. By the end of intern year, you should be starting to get a sense of what you're interested in. We're going to plan to institute sort of a halfway checkpoint with myself, because I don't personally advise. I mean, my door is open for any of the residents, but most of them are getting their day-to-day advising from their program director or their program advisor. But to sort of have that halfway point check-in where all the second years will come and sort of sit down with me and say, this is where I think I'm at, these are the things I think I need, or these are things that are going well. Because residency, this hasn't changed, I don't think, for anyone, but it's just a busy time, and I think it's very easy to sort of get into, you know, put your blinders on and come to work and go home every day, and all of a sudden you lift your head up and you're going to be graduating in 9 months. So we want to help people have some checkpoints along the way so that they feel like they're getting what they need. Sense of community I kind of alluded to, so Block Education has helped with that to some extent. And community is more than just connection with peers, it's also a connection with the healthcare team that you work with. So I think the residents over their course of their experience here at the university do start to make those connections with the floor nurses and the ED and the PICU and the NICU. But that's been more of a challenge at Minneapolis and St. Paul Children's because your interaction there may be much more sporadic. And so starting this academic year, our residents will go to one or the other. So they'll go to they'll come here to the university, and then they'll go to either Minneapolis or St. Paul for the bulk of their additional general inpatient time, and then spend some time at Hennepin. And I really have to give kudos to our partners at Children's Hospitals and Clinics, because this required an incredible amount of effort on their part, totally rebuilding every resident schedule, hiring nurse practitioners, changing team structures that had been in place for several years. And I think it really speaks to the deep commitment of our educational partners at Children's that they were willing to try this out with us. So we'll see how it goes. I hope that it will give residents that sense of home base. I'm part of the Minneapolis crew, I'm part of the St. Paul crew. I can predictably go to the same place multiple times each year and make connections. We try to pair people with places where their continuity clinic would be likely to send patients, so they would start to really have that network of continuity with patients in place. Improving our primary care training, I think that's something that we're really just starting to dive into. So we get information from our ACGME survey. They added a couple years ago really detailed questions for the third years only about how prepared people feel to go out into primary care. So I think we'll be able to track that over time. One cool new thing is that the Masons, when they gave their large gift for the naming of the hospital, also earmarked a small pool of money to support residents doing rural rotations. So we're going to have 3 to 4 residents who are going to go out to places like Fergus Falls and Hutchinson and do rotations this upcoming year, which is pretty neat. And it's kind of a return to something we used to have probably 10 years ago that used to be a regular part of our program, that residents did rural rotations. We added a more formal continuity clinic curriculum this year, and I think we just need to really think about where our bursts of primary outpatient care happen. Right now we're very front-loaded towards the intern year, which I think has some strengths, but then over time the residents get less experience, and we're finding that our upper-level residents are sort of just barely getting enough continuity clinics by the numbers, so it's something we're going to have to work on. Procedures, I think we're honestly doing okay. The way that the emergency department runs here, I think residents are getting 20-fold as many procedures as they used to, because our faculty really put such a premium on letting the residents have first crack at any procedure. So laceration repair, draining abscesses, putting on splints. I think there still always is a lot of interest in a sedation or anesthesia elective, which we've had some challenges with putting something like that together. Circumcisions remain this sort of elusive procedure to figure out how to get people that experience, because our primary newborn experience is at Hennepin, which is the place where residents would usually get that training. But at Hennepin, it's still the OBs who do the circumcisions. And so they're appropriately sort of less invested in spending lots of time teaching peds residents how to do circumcisions. We find ways to do it, but it's not very systematic right now. And then we're also just getting all of the information into one place. So we're going to have all of our procedures logged in the same residency management suite, so we can at least see the numbers and track things over time. So as far as research and scholarship goes, one of the as a large academic health center, certainly one of the things we're really interested in is recruiting physician scientists or people who plan to go on and have research be a big part of their future career. And some residency programs have very clear packages for physician scientists. We haven't had that in the past. We've had the flexibility to, on a one-off basis, offer things. Bryce Binstead and I have been having some really nice conversations about how we might structure something a little bit more formally, and I think we'd like to make some strides in that in the next year or two. And then Mike Pitt has been doing some neat work within his hospitalist division. He got a small mentorship grant from the med school that he used to do this thing he calls P-Quad, which is positive peer pressured productivity. So it's basically a raffle where you get to put in a ticket for each time you present a poster at a meeting or submit a manuscript or submit an abstract. So the more times you do something scholarly, the more chances you have to win. And it's cash prizes or gift cards. And they've had quite nice success with it within their hospitalist division. So we're going to do a pilot of that with our residency class for this upcoming year. It's data that we have collected. We have to for what we report to ACGME, but we're going to get it in more detail and on a more regular basis. So I think that's going to be kind of fun to see how that works out. And then just as a kind of another lens of research and scholarship is our approach to quality improvement. So our residents, during their second year, they're all excused from the wards for 2 days to do what we call Quality Improvement Boot Camp, where we take advantage of our faculty educators, both here and at Children's, to teach them core principles of quality improvement and patient safety. And then the second year residents, whether they like it or not, participate in the longitudinal quality improvement project. And I think they do learn a lot from it. You know, what we all learn when we're out in practice is you have to find ways to fit in this kind of work, and working by email or catching a morning meeting or grabbing lunch together. There's a Minnesota Metro Council on Graduate Medical Education, which is kind of a organization of all the residency programs in the Twin Cities and the graduate programs, and they have a quality improvement forum every year. And I was like bursting with pride because we had 9 posters there. It was awesome. Peds had such a great showing. We totally got robbed in the finalists, but next year, and actually some of our groups from the year before have presented their work at Press and PAS, which is really awesome. And I think we're also had one of our groups got an AAP grant to do some work with charting obesity metrics in the chart and thinking about obesity prevention. So this is really, it's something I'm so proud of. The residents gracefully do this additional work that I asked them to do, and I think it helps them to make connections and learn how to do quality improvement, at least the rudimentary skills to get them started. Resident well-being I mentioned, so we're going to be joining a national pilot project looking at both how do we just figure out if residents are having troubles. There's something called the MASLAC inventory, which is a measure of burnout, and then thinking about ways to promote resilience among our residents. And the pilot project has a specific interest in whether global health experiences may have an impact on burnout and resilience, but it's also going to just help us look at our program more globally. And one of the things we've sort of knocked around but haven't implemented in any formal ways to try to think about how we might identify people at each of the sites where the residents are that they knew they could turn to if they were going through a rough time. I think sometimes it can feel a little daunting to go to your program director or your program advisor and sort of ask for help or let them know that you're having a tough time. But if we had some other folks, whether it be our chaplain or social worker or peer mentoring, so probably what I'll need is to hear from the residents about what they would want to support them. And then we try to do things that are fun, like go to Twins games and happy hours and dog park and lots of sports. We got lots of sports going on, broomball and softball and volleyball. So I think people are remembering to get out and have fun even when they're working hard. So there is a tiny amount of data in this, just to be at least true Grand Rounds fashion to some extent. So when we thought about measuring program outcomes, the sort of big buckets we thought about were recruitment, curriculum and program evaluation, thinking about our residents' academic performance, mostly related to board pass rates and in-training exams, scholarship and research, and then alumni data is something that we don't have very well nailed down now, but we certainly need to. So I think I find these numbers to be sort of staggering. So in a 5-year period, the number of applicants to our program has gone from 419 to 1,030. So as you can imagine, there's no possible way that we can even look at every single application in any level of detail. We have a lot of people who graduate from international medical schools who apply to our program. We interview very few of them because it's often hard to understand how their training would set them up to be successful in our program. But you can see that the US medical school graduates has basically doubled in the course of 5 years as well. And this is really kind of a national program. All the students are just globally nervous. So they all apply to 25 PEDS programs. They really have no intention of interviewing at 25 programs. They still interview, I think, at the same number of places. So it makes it really challenging for us on the front end, and we're having to do more weeding out of who we offer to than we would have in the past. So we sometimes will say, like, really, Alabama, I sort of doubt that you're gonna come to Minnesota. And we wait for people to reach out to us and say, hey, I have this connection, this is why I applied to your program. And I don't know that that's a good metric, but we don't have a good way of weeding through all that and really understanding who should we offer interviews to. We are interviewing more people generally than we have in the past. So 2013, 2014 with cancellations, we ended up at about 160, but probably we're gonna target the sort of 170, 180 range for recruitment. I personally talk to every single one of them one-on-one for 10 minutes, which maybe I'll give up eventually because it does sort of suck the life force out of me, but I think that I really enjoy it. I love seeing our program through the eyes of people who've made the trip to come here, and I think that the applicants I hope, appreciate the added time that we take to give them a personal touch. And I think we've really got recruitment down to a science. I mean, Amy and Allison and our office team run a tight ship, and the day really runs very well, but it does rely on a lot of faculty helping us to do interviews, because we have each applicant meets with 3 faculty members and myself, so it's a lot of people that they're talking to. So in terms of the program, the pieces of data that we have are our own internal evaluations, and then every year the ACGME asks the residents to fill out a survey that's de-identified, but we get aggregate data back. The timing is kind of unfortunate, so the residents did the survey in February and March, but I won't get this year's results until probably July, when all of the third years who could tell me why they answered what they answered are gone. So we have to sort of track it over time and draw conclusions about trends. There are sort of 6 bucket areas. There's things like duty hours, education, faculty, teamwork, patient safety. I pulled out a few metrics where we have slightly lower scores as compared to the national average. They reported in terms of the % of compliant responses that you have, which they're not very clear what they mean by compliant, but I suspect that it means a 4 or a 5. It's a 5-point scale. So in the sort of teaching area, our scores in terms of, and I don't get to see what the questions are either. The residents in the audience could probably tell you what the question is. I get the concept of the question. So it's sufficient instruction, faculty and staff are interested in teaching, and promote an environment of inquiry. And we're not far off from the national average, but we are kind of persistently below the national average in those areas. And I haven't really been able to tease out what people are getting at when they answer what they answer with those things. We did, this is tiny, so you won't be able to see it, but on last year's program evaluation survey, and we'll continue to ask it this way over time, try to see if there were any site-specific differences in the experience that residents have that might inform a certain rotation or group of faculty that we could target for faculty development that might change the experience of the residents. Then there's a part about evaluation. So there's a question about, do people trust that we use evaluations to improve the program? I think that has nicely gone up, and we're at the national average now. And then satisfied with feedback after assignments. I believe what residents are answering is, are they satisfied that they get feedback about their performance on rotations? This is terrible for us. We have to do something about it. So that's definitely has been and will continue to be on my radar about how to make sure residents are getting real-time feedback about their performance. And again, just as sort of site-specific, does it seem like there are any sites who are really doing well in this area that would have things to teach? I would say not an obvious outlier in one way or the other. I think it's pretty standard that it's going okay at most of our sites. And then in terms of education, kind of just below the national average in terms of opportunities for scholarly activity, balance of education and not compromised by clinical service, probably have some room for improvement. This data to show personal effectiveness is a metric that's just the bane of everyone's existence. I think it means us telling you data about how your patients do. It's very hard for us to give you that kind of information because they work in so many different settings. So that you can see the national averages are 3.3, 3.4. We clearly have work to do in that area. And I'm getting some ideas about how we can feed things back to the residents. And I think the implementation of our QI curriculum has really helped with the residents feeling that they've had a chance to participate in QI. And I just included the handoff since we're doing this big IPASS initiative. I think it'll be interesting to see over time. This is a new question they added in 2012 about whether residents feel that they're losing information when they're handing over patient care. And we're below, again, not terrible in that regard, but I think that will be an important one for us to track. The in-training exam is the test that residents take to sort of predict how they might do on the boards. It's really for their own personal, professional development to help them guide their studying. They completely changed the scoring of both the boards and the in-training exam a couple of years ago. So it used to go basically from 0 to 800. Now it goes from 0 to 300, with 180 being a passing 3-digit score. And the thing that is really nice is now it's just a straight percentage. If you get this percent right, you will pass the boards. It used to be normed where a certain percent of people had to fail the boards, that bell curve thing, which was just kind of mean because you'd work really hard and study for the boards, and then some people were bound to fail. So exciting, happy dance, me gasps of joy in the hallway when I opened our board pass rate from last year was 100% for our first time test takers, which I look back and that has happened one other time in like 1998 or something, but the change in scoring definitely was helpful across the country. I think people have better pass rates, but you can look on the ABP website, and I think that over the past 3 years, our trend has been very good. We've definitely tried to be much more specific with the residents about just helping them to identify if they may be at risk for having trouble on the boards and connecting them with learner support services through the medical school and being more specific about study plans instead of just saying, hey, everybody, make sure you study for the boards when they graduate. So I think, who knows if it's block education or they changed the scoring or what it was, but I'll take 100%. So third years, just hit the books as you leave us. Alumni data, we don't have much, we need more. There's a lot of interest in the Midwest about creating a standard way of tracking that data, which I think that would be a really nice approach for us. And then just wrap up, new interns are coming. So Monday is the first day of orientation. These are our new Peds interns. These are our new Med Peds interns. And here is our EPAC cohort who we're gonna show you them at every possible opportunity because we're really excited to have them. So that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions that people might have, or I can stick around for a couple minutes before I go to clinic afterwards. And definitely I would love to have questions from the residents. I mean, I know you guys sort of hear me talk about the day-to-day or the short-term projects, but if you have questions or things you'd like to say about the longer-term planning, happy to hear from you as well, all of you.
While you're thinking of a question, I just want to make one point of clarification. Emily alluded earlier to the 2 residents who committed suicide. That was not here.
New York.
So some of you may be aware that last summer there were 2 interns in New York City who committed suicide within a day of one another at separate programs. They were unrelated, but it has drawn a lot of attention to the broad topic of physician suicide and more specifically whether there are issues of well-being in residency that need to be addressed. So the ACGME and others have taken a big interest in it. There's some good opinion pieces in the Atlantic and in the New York Times about it if you're interested. Questions or comments? Must have done a good job.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Yeah. Oh,
thanks, Heidi. I got the audience all stocked up with former chief residents. That's good.
I was going to come up afterwards, but I was just out at PAS, and the AAP is going to be rolling out a new resident resiliency curriculum. So I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I went to their workshop at APPD. It's quite good. I mean, it's really comprehensive, but the nice thing about it is it's very kind of plug and play where you could pull out little chunks of it and some of it's as simple as, sort of 1 minute mindfulness of sort of being quiet. And I always come back from APPD with like 1,000 ideas, but one of the things I was thinking about is having like one morning report a week where we just have a basket that everybody can put those lovely phones and pagers in and all sit outside the door and answer them all. Because I think that the residents just never have time or someone isn't beep, 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 I mean, you just hear, and so I think we need to like find ways to, yeah, there we go, perfect, thank you, phone. So thinking about ways to put a little moment of calm into our everyday and then thinking about how to pay attention to our own wellness. So it's a great curriculum, and I think we'll definitely look to that to see what we could use.
Thank you for that. There was a couple of the metrics that you showed that sort of grabbed my interest, and I think the board pass rate of 100% is awesome, and it sort of improved year by year.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like education in itself is an issue in terms of why we're scoring a bit lower in some of these questions, but I do wonder with, in particular, feedback being a significantly lower score on multiple years, that if something more structured were implemented in terms of providing, as frequently as weekly feedback to residents from their attendings or their fellows, could that help not only improve that score, but some of the other scores? Because to me, as a, very recently a resident, I felt like it was super helpful to get feedback, and it made me feel like people were more interested in my education. And so I can see how one change there can improve multiple things.
Yeah, and one of the projects that Sonia Coliani and I have been just starting to build and flesh out, that I, in the interest of time, didn't include in this, is a concept that we're calling 1 Minute Mentor, which is a faculty development package that we hope to put together just to help faculty feel comfortable giving very brief, specific feedback after discrete encounters. Because I think the way our touch points are with each other, a faculty member might be like, oh, I only worked with them for 3 days, I can't really say anything. Well, that's baloney. You can give somebody feedback after 1 hour of working with them. But I think we have to empower our faculty to have the words to say, I love the way you noticed that the mom was crossing her arms and seemed frustrated, and that you sat down and made sure to slow down when she gave you that nonverbal cue. I mean, you can see that after 5 minutes of working with someone. But I think it takes practice to do that, and I practice a lot because I give a lot of secondhand feedback, and some of the other faculty don't have that practice. So we want to help our faculty build that skill set, and then create sort of maybe even a reward infrastructure to recognize our faculty who are leaders in that. And that's some of the stuff we've had on our end of year survey. We actually asked residents who stands out as being good at giving feedback, and we hope to engage that group of people to learn their best practices and try to spread it. But you're absolutely right. And that was clear when we did our clinical competence meeting, that we do these big end of rotation evaluations, which I think made sense as we were adapting to the new milestones language. But the downside for the residents is they get this like one big eval at the end of every rotation, and if that person gets behind, they might go a few months without having anything, which is really unacceptable. And so I think we're going to try to implement a lot more of the sort of hands-on, quick, real-time feedback. And the work we've done with EPAC, I think, has really made me think differently about how you give feedback and how you do it in real time. But yeah, I think you're right, and feedback is huge. We've got to work on it.
Well, Emily, thank you very much. It was an expansive and great presentation, and I want to thank you on behalf of the department for all your hard work with the residency program. Thanks very much.